I really enjoy the opportunity to read as much as I have been able to do in my life. And it's really a fun thing for me because it's not every day that people get to read what their other coworkers are thinking or doing, or their peers or people in their same situation. I know in Earl's past, his educational past, I know that you probably didn't read about what some other superintendent was doing across the country. And Ron, I know you don't deal with other engineers and people that are dealing with that. You're not reading about what they're doing in their lives. We don't do that, Ron, in radio. I mean, you just don't, you hear about things, but you don't get the opportunity to read about them. And I enjoy doing that. There's a young man, his name is Eric Snyder, and he tells a story about his wife, Tammy, or he and his wife, Tammy, as they traveled a lot, and being ministers, they moved quite often. And they had taken a work in a large community outside of a large city, and it's somewhere near Cleveland. And they moved 5 times in 1 year. And Tammy hated moving, but finally they found a house that they were going to buy and thought that was going to be it. And when they were living in Cleveland, they had bought the house. They'd been there a few months, and Tammy decided she had this long, flowing, brown, curly hair down to her waist. And they had a newborn, and she was just, baby was always in her hair, and always she says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut my hair, and I'm going to color it. And so she did. She went from a long, dark brown hair to short and blonde. About a week after she did that, the new neighbors across the street were talking to Eric in his in the front yard, and his neighbor came over and said, "Hey, I wanted to ask you a question. What happened to your wife?" And Eric said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've seen you in the car with some blonde-headed girl lately. What happened to your wife? I thought you were a preacher." He said, "Oh, I buried her out back somewhere." He didn't, just to let you know. Sometimes there are things that happen that others don't recognize that it's really us. They see things and they think they see what they think they see, but sometimes there's things that happens in our lives that causes others not to recognize us. Tragedy sometimes happens, however, when God doesn't recognize us. And that's a scary proposition. And I've thought about that over the last several weeks and months, and I want to be honest with you. Dealing with our shepherds has been a blessing for me. It reminded me of a story that a woman was in the hospital and she had a near-death experience while on the operating table, and she dreamed in that experience that she saw God and asked him if it was her time to die, and he assured her that it was not, that she had another 40 years, 6 months, and 21 days to live. Nailed it. Knew exactly how long she had to live. And so she remembered God's revelation to her, as she said, after coming out of the anesthetic, and she decided to make the most out of her newfound longevity of life. So she decides to make that change, and she gets the works. Liposuction, facelift, tummy tuck. We get the idea. She went all out. New wardrobe. She even had professionals come in, change her hair color, an optometrist for contacts, and she went to Nordstrom to consult for a whole new wardrobe. And after the last operation, she walked out of the hospital all dressed up and turning every head she passed. She was so impressed with her own appearance that she stepped off of a curb as she was looking at herself in the window as she walked by in front of a speeding ambulance and died. When she got up to heaven, she immediately said to God, she said, "What happened? You told me I had another 40 years to live." And God replied, "I don't recognize you." Yeah. Have you ever wondered if God recognizes you whenever he sees you? Have you ever thought about that? Does God recognize me when he sees me? I mean, that maybe your life is not as consistent and godly as it used to be, and you start to wonder, you start to scratch your head and think, Have you ever done something that whenever it was over, you thought, that's not me, that wasn't me that did that, or I don't know why I did that. And immediately, my thing is I'll go, oh, why did you do that? And maybe you do the same thing. But you know why we have thoughts like that? It's because we know God expects more out of us. And he does. The truth is that God does recognize us. No matter what we change about our physical appearance, God recognizes us because, see, God doesn't look at the outward appearance. He looks at the inward appearance. He looks at the heart. He looks at the very thing that we cannot see in each other. I mean, do you ever feel like you're the exact person that God wants you to be? I know I don't. But those of us who are serious about calling ourselves Christians know that the Christian faith is a journey. We talk about it all the time. We understand that. We have that understanding, and that there's always room for improvement. We also know that it might be painful, but we have to allow Jesus to mold our hearts, to mold our hands, our heads, and our habits. We know that it's going to mean we're going to have to change who we are as people in the world. And mainly those changes mean correcting character flaws or specific sins in our lives that we have to really just sit down and say, I just can't do this anymore. Or I might need to fine-tune some of the things in my life. But if you're here tonight and you're struggling with that or a specific sin, maybe you've heard the call of God to change your behavior. The Bible reminds us that everyone has sin in our lives. We're all flawed. We all make mistakes. We do. And it's those little things that are inside of us that chew on us. And they make us feel bad about who we are. I mean, I have one that Satan just attacks me on all the time. And I'm going to tell you something, that it's something that happened to me whenever I was a freshman in high school. A freshman in high school. And it chewed on me. And I realized at that time that I needed some help. And it was difficult. I remember exactly where I was. I remember exactly what was said. I remember how it came about. I remember that whenever it happened, that it poisoned me. It crippled me to the point where I, at the time, couldn't grow anymore spiritually. I had let my guard down. Satan trapped me and poisoned me because of a worldly preference that I had. And every day, it seems like, Satan will put in my mind, and he'll say, hey, Britt, do you still remember? Remember? You remember how you felt? How does that, don't raise your hands, but think about it for a moment. How many of you have that same feeling? Where Satan's just working on you in one specific place. You're doing a good job everywhere else, but that one, he chews you up and spits you out. And I caught myself for years begging God to forgive me of something that I had asked him to forgive me 20 years earlier. Today I can say that most of the time I can just say, would you leave me alone? And it'll go away. But that temptation to dwell on it and to think about it and to feel bad about it again, God says, don't do that. He says, I took it. I've forgiven you. Don't let that bother you. But do you know that whenever ministers and spiritual and spiritual counselors and Christian counselors deal with people on the product of sin in their lives, there's always just that one thing that gets you. It reminded me of what Warren said Wednesday night, if you were here, about city slickers and that, what does it take to be a real cowboy? You know, it's always that one thing. If you could just find that one thing. And I'm going to tell you what, Satan knows how to use that. He plays on our weaknesses. Maybe he uses the coarse language of a friend or something that happens to you in the workplace to spark that memory. It may be something so small that it may. I had a friend of mine tell me when we were talking about this, he said, every time I see a bass boat go by. I thought, what? Another friend told me every time he passed a golf course. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, what's yours? And I said, waking up. I hope I do that a lot. Maybe he uses that. Or maybe if that doesn't work, he might try to make you become greedy or selfish or covet things that aren't yours. And if that doesn't work, he might make you think you're smarter than you are and that you're therefore better than others. But do you see how it works? He just finds what our weaknesses are and he plays on them. Satan keeps changing the menu also on the way that he'll present it to you. So as he changes that menu, let me ask you this. What is your favorite dish on the menu? Think about it. Is it the desire of the one who isn't married to you maybe? Or it might be in the words that we choose to use. It might not even be words, but it may be a place where we've loosened our tongue and maybe said something about someone that was said privately, or at least should remain private. Maybe our sin is subtler, like arrogance or negativity, or your attitude is that everyone should consult you before acting. That's a parent thing, isn't it? But there's a story in the Bible about a woman that Jesus meets. In fact, she's brought to him by this very religious group of the sect of the Jews called the Pharisees. The woman was caught in the very act of adultery. And the last time I checked, those religious leaders probably should have brought another person with them, shouldn't he? They caught her in the very act, so why did they bring just the woman? Maybe they put the person up. The encounter is found in John 8, verses 7 through 11. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time. And notice this, the older ones first. Until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. And Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. Now I want you to keep that passage in mind because it has a lot of elements that I think we need and we need to have in our lives. But right now, I want us to look at that last statement from Jesus to the woman. He says, go and leave your life of sin. She had to do some changing. Being a follower of Jesus demands that we change our lives. Jesus said, did you catch it? Jesus said, stop sinning. Stop doing that. Being a Christian doesn't mean just changing my life once and that's it. It means that the Spirit of God is in our hearts convicting us of sin. Jesus standing on that magnificent mountain with his apostles that are standing there, and he's about to go up into heaven, and he's standing there, and they're looking at him, and they're ready for him to go. But what did they want to do? They didn't know what to do. But he said this about the Holy Spirit in John 16, verses 7 and 8. But very truly I tell you, it is for your good that I am going away. Unless I go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. Three things. It's going to prove the world wrong about sin, about righteousness, and about judgment. The Spirit of God convicts us of our sin. Our love for Jesus will help us beat that sin. It'll help us overcome it. So what do? Well, let me say this. I have found that there is something that we can have in a relationship, and one of our members here shared with me how he dealt with that in his life. He had somebody that he would sit down with and talk about with this other person his sins. And not just that he talked about his sins, but he talked about his temptations and the things that were bothering him. And they built that relationship, and that relationship built over the years. And it was something that the man held dear to him in his heart. You can only do that one of two ways. You can only do it if you have a relationship with someone that you feel comfortable with enough to talk about the things in your life. Now, I'm not saying that we need to do that in every instance. I'm not. Some people, that's just not what they do. But whenever we have relationships that we have with others, and we can have that relationship, and we know that whenever we build those relationships, that those relationships are going to be binding on us in our hearts. It makes me wonder why it is that we run so hard away from having those relationships. And I think that that's a work of Satan. When really what we need to be, and what James talked about this morning, we need to have that family idea, that family concept, that being together, working together, striving hard to be the kind of people God wants us to be. And I really think that deep down in our hearts, that's really what we want to do. But whenever we start getting so close that we get so close, we get uncomfortable. And we get uncomfortable because we don't want anybody to know our secrets. And I'm not saying that we should share all of our secrets. But what I am saying is this, that we need to have those types of relationships that James talked about this morning, where we can spend time with each other in study and learning. What did he say? He said, look, you got to stop sinning so that God can prove who he is. Righteousness. Getting up and standing firm. Being who we need to be. He told the woman, go and sin no more. Who was there to convict her? Because see, there's two things that we have to understand. You're one of two groups. You're either a part of a group that's going to encourage, or you're going to be a part of a group that discourages. There's no in between. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm not a part of a group, so I'm not an encourager or a discourager. Wait a minute, God told us to do what? To build up each other. And we can't do that if we don't spend time together. And we can't get to be a family unless we spend quality time with each other. That's the beauty of our shine groups. And that's one of the reasons why I think they're so important. Do you know that we have people that will go to a shine group that won't come here on Sunday night? They'll make sure they're at shine group, but they just don't see the need because, see, there's no growth in their lives on Sunday nights. I remember whenever I was in preaching school, and one of the things that they talked about was a story that this guy had. He got up and he used it in a chapel sermon. He got up and he stood up. He said, I had a dream last night, guys, that we were all in heaven. And he said we were standing in line, we were so excited, we just, we were on pins and needles and wondering what was going on, what was it going to be like. And then all of a sudden we heard a cheer way down toward the gate from where we were standing as we were going in. And he said there was somebody running along the line as we were lined up to go into heaven. And he said, they're not counting Sunday nights, they're not counting Sunday nights. Y'all don't like that, huh? Does God count Sunday nights? We've got people that believe that if you don't have a worship assembly in the church building on Sunday night, we're doing something wrong. I had a lady tell me one time we were having 180 people on Wednesday nights whenever we were down in Franklin, in a congregation that met and averaged 155 to 160 on Sunday morning. And she called me from Dallas and called me up. Are you the preacher there? And I said, yes, I am. She goes, I want to know something. I notice that you're having 180 to 185 on Wednesday nights, and that's more than you're having on Sunday morning for worship. And I said, yes, ma'am, we are. She goes, what are you doing wrong? It's not a matter of doing wrong. It's a matter of doing something right. Do you know that our attendance on Sunday night goes up 20% when we have small groups? Do you know that only 1% of those are visitors? So what do small groups do? What do shine groups do? It brings us closer together. See, those that don't feel that connection on Sunday nights or Sunday mornings feel it in the smaller groups. They have that connection. And some of us say, well, they should just be here and buckle up and they should be doing this and this and that. Hey, it's not what it's about. They're going to be here to worship with the family on Sunday morning. But see, they see that need for connection, to have somebody that they can relate to on a personal level. It's good that we get up and we stand up and we shake hands. We did that for 10 minutes this morning. I didn't think Chris was ever going to get up and lead singing. And I was more worried about that. Come on, Chris. Come on, Chris. We got to go. We got to go. We got to go. We got people. We got food. And I was sitting there thinking about the wrong thing. And I stopped and I looked around and I saw all the people. I said, shut up, Britt. These people are loving each other. Why are we trying to push it? We need to get together. We need to spend more time together. And if we can do that in a smaller group, and we're more comfortable with that, and we can get closer together, and we can learn each other better, don't you think we can do a little bit better job? I hope so. And that's really where we're going to focus this year in our shine groups. I love the fact that we have one here, because there are people who still travel and need a place to go and to visit. But I think whenever we do that, the Spirit works on us. And when the Spirit works on us, He does one of two things. He either builds us up or He convicts us of sin. And I think either way, I think building us up is convicting us of sin sometimes, or convicting us of sin is building us up. But our love for Jesus will help us beat sin. And I think our small group is the mirror to the balance. We have to have life change in order to be more like Jesus. We got to change some things. I believe that life change happens best whenever we are in a small group. Let me ask you a question. How many of you want to move this year? Anybody want to move? Why do you, I'm going to go ahead and let you answer. Why do you hate moving so much? Why do we hate to move? I'm sorry? You hate moving, but why do you hate moving so much? Packing. I hate packing. I've moved more times than I care. I got to thinking the other day, I think I've moved in my lifetime almost 60 times. Counting the time that I was born till the time that I lived here. 60, I think. I know we moved 17 times from the time I was born until I started first grade. There's a big chunk of it right there. 17 different places. And then last night, whenever I was talking to my dad, I said, Dad, do you remember the first house we lived in? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, you know, the first house I bought was $29,000. I said, right over here in River Oaks. I said, it was a little old bitty 2-bedroom house. He said, yeah, the first one I bought was $4,200 over by the football field in Jefferson. I said, which one was that? He said, it's the first one you lived in. Really? I said, I don't remember that one. He said, you couldn't remember that. He said, that's where we moved whenever we left Shreveport area. When you got out of the hospital, we lived in Wascom. We moved from Wascom over there. He said, you couldn't. He said, I bought that house for $4,200. I said, really? He said, yeah, it was a huge house. He said, it had 2 bedrooms. Said the living room was a 10 by 12. The bedrooms were about 8 by 8. He said, and it had a tin roof. He said it was a great house. And I said, what was so great about that? He said it was right next to the football field. On Friday nights, I just had to walk across the street. $4,200. I did not remember that house, but I remembered one. He said, oh, that was the 3rd house that you lived in. He said, how old were you then? I said, I think I was 3. He said, yeah, that's about what it was. He said, you know what I hated about moving out of that house? He had no idea what I was preaching about. And I said, what's that? And he said, packing. But how many of us would like to pack up and move all by ourselves? Nobody to help you. And when I mean by yourself, I mean without any family or friends, where you do it all. Is there anybody that's ready to do that? I'm glad Lisa's not here. Because Lisa and I've moved so many times, and every time we've had that we've moved, we've also had the opportunity to have a team of people help us to move. And the point is that whenever we do that, we enlist every friend we can find to help us change our address. So if that's the point, that we enlist our friends to help us with the change of address, then why do we insist on renovating our spiritual house alone? Why do we think that we ought to just change our spiritual life without any help? Shouldn't we enlist our friends to help us do that, and our family? I mean, you may be afraid of what you'll find if you were to join a small group. But I bet if you found a group that was reflective of Jesus, that you would want to be there all the time. Because, see, Jesus isn't critical. He wasn't critical of the woman. He didn't approve of what she did, but he wasn't critical. He wasn't awfully critical about those who were making accusations. Rather, he was compassionate. He doesn't blame her, but he does try to help her. He doesn't call her out, but he takes time to care for her. He doesn't alienate or accuse her, but he does assist her on how to have a better life. He's not negative, but he does want to nurture her soul. See, Jesus isn't callous. Jesus is a comforter. And I think that that's what a small group should be. It should be a group that I want to be a part of because of the way that they make me feel about who I am as a Christian. There are places where community is found, lives are shared, and responsibilities divided. A place where we can be open and share our experiences and help each other grow. They are a place where you can be heard and know that you'll still be loved. See, I think Jesus was the ultimate small group leader. You take those 12 disciples, and he took them and he watched the lives of that small group change because of their relationships. I mean, how fulfilling it must have been to see Peter step out of that boat onto the water. You think Jesus was disappointed? He said, Lord, if it's you, let me step out of this boat. And he said, come on. Jesus knew what was going to happen. But don't you think he was pretty excited about it? Hey, he's got that much faith. And then, see, the waves started catching Peter's eye and the wind in his hair. And Peter took his eyes off Jesus and he began to sink. And he reached down and grabbed him by the hand and he pulled him up, and immediately they got in the boat. That's the Jesus that we need to share with people, who encourages us to step out of the boat and take steps that we never thought we'd take before. And when we start sinking, call on him and those around us. By the way, did you notice that nobody else got out of the boat? Did you ever wonder why? Did you ever wonder why it was that Peter wanted to step out of the boat? I'm going to tell you something. Peter wanted to be like Jesus, not in power. He wanted to follow him. He wanted to be with him. Oh, he stuck his foot in his mouth a lot. But I can only imagine how great it must have felt to watch Jesus feed the 5,000. And I can only imagine how embarrassed I would be when he caught me being arrogant and wondering where in the world my place would be in the kingdom a few short days later. But folks, that's what a small group is. A shine group to help us be real with each other. To understand that we can do great things together by getting closer to God together. By providing a certain environment where self-expression is encouraged, where everybody can belong. I hate to say it, but it needs to be something along the lines of cheers, except in a spiritual way. And whenever you walk in, everybody says, Britt! Instead of Norm. A place where everybody knows your name. It needs to be a place where you can share something about yourself that you never thought you'd be able to share. It's a place where you form a team of movers who will help you pack your house and renovate and be what God expects. There's some obvious benefits of being in a group like that. In a group that is a good group, the following benefits that come from being a part of a small group are like this. First of all, you're going to understand the Bible better. I heard a story recently about a church that went through a huge building project, and just before the carpet was laid, the church leader said, we want to do something completely different, creative, so that people can really feel like that they contributed and that God was glorified. So they decided that what they would do is give everybody permanent markers. Remember now, the whole building's finished. They weren't going to put in pews. They were going to put in chairs that could be moved and that type of thing. But before they put the carpet down on the floor, they decided they would take permanent markers and write on the concrete. That way they could really say that we stand on the Word of God, I guess, if they wrote scriptures down. But the people came, and each area that they took, they wrote Bible verses that related to them and their families. And they did that all over the building. The leaders decided that the verse that they wanted as the eldership was the verse that said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am with them also. The reality is sometimes the best of us needs help with the basic Bible navigation. We don't all know it all. And there's no shame in not knowing every answer to a biblical question. But one of the things that we need to understand is that in a small group, you'll be provided with opportunities to really learn about God and His Word. And there may be somebody there that can also add in where you don't have the expertise. They'll provide opportunities to dig in and go deeper in Bible study that'll allow you to have the chance to see what the Bible says about relevant issues that affect our lives. I was talking to my sister about that this week, and they have their small groups. They do it a little different than we do as far as our shine groups and theirs. They do it every other week. They do it all year long, but every other week. And they said that, 9 times out of 10, they'll have a Bible verse, and they'll start talking about that Bible verse, and they will leave it completely and get onto some topic that came from the verse that had nothing to do with where the teacher was going to go. And she said, I've learned more that way than any other way that I've ever studied the Bible. But those small groups and shine groups will allow you to have the chance to see the Bible, what the Bible says about those relevant issues. And they shouldn't just get you familiar with the Bible. But if you're a part of a group that is inquisitive, you'll begin to see God's entire plan from the beginning of the world to right now. You'll be able to see what God planned at the very beginning and culminated in the church through the salvation in the form of Jesus Christ. Small groups will help us understand who God is and why He wants to get to know us and why we ought to get to know each other. Secondly, small groups will help you feel like you're more of a part of God's family. There was a married couple who recently moved to New York, and they were trying to live up to a certain lifestyle, so they went in and went up to an upscale party that the man was invited to, and the conversation turned to music, and conversation turned to Mozart. And someone said, absolutely brilliant, magnificent, a musical genius. And the man's wife, wanting to join the conversation, remarked casually, Mozart, you're right, I love him. This morning I saw him get on the number 5 bus going to Yankee Stadium. There was a hush. And everyone looked at her, and her husband was mortified, and he pulled her away and whispered in anger, we're leaving right now, get your coat and let's get out of here. And as they drove home, he kept muttering to himself, and finally his wife turned to him and says, you're angry about something. He says, you think? You noticed? He said, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. You saw Mozart take the number 5 bus to Yankee Stadium. Are you kidding me? Everybody knows the number 5 doesn't go to Yankee Stadium. Have you ever been embarrassed by your family? My mother passed a car in a no passing zone one time, and we were on our way to my grandparents, and we got stopped about a mile down the road. There's no way the police officer saw her do that. But Mother said, I hope he didn't see me do that. And the officer came up and he said, ma'am, I just wanted to tell you that, he said, there's nothing really wrong. I'm not going to write you a ticket or anything, but you've got a tail light out. And out here on this dark road, your other one's not real bright either. And he said, in this car, whenever one goes out, the other one's pretty dim, and you need to get that fixed as soon as you can. It's just a safety hazard. See, but my mother was more worried about than what the officer said is that I told her, as I sat in the front seat, when he gets up here, I'm going to tell him you passed in a no passing zone. She didn't like that at all. She didn't think it was funny. And so every time I'd try to say something, she'd put her hand over my mouth. And I would squirm. I said, my mama did. Well, my mama. So as she held her hand over my mouth and the officer was laughing, she was rolling up her window, I finally got it out. My mama passed in the no passing zone, and she slapped me. She said if I wanted him to know that, I would have told him. I said, but Mom, you did something that you were ashamed of. And well, I didn't say that. That's what I thought. I said, you did something you shouldn't have done. And she goes, he did not see me do that. And yes, I should not have done that. She said, I'm sorry I hit you. And I said, that's okay. And I started rolling down my window to tell him, hey, she hit me. He was already in his car. My mother was fully embarrassed. Have you ever been embarrassed by something in your family? Some of us are even embarrassed by our church family. But we need to remember this. It doesn't matter. We still belong together. It doesn't stop us from being family, like James said this morning. And I hope that we'll all get to know our church family here more and more as we go along. And I think the best way to do that is in our 2 ways, our small groups, our shine groups, and 2, in our shepherd lunches. And I hope that you will understand that and see what I'm talking about, because whenever we're together in small groups like that, we have the opportunity to be provided a place where we find out where we belong, to meet people and to get to know each other better. I was very proud today. My brother and my sister were here. My dad was here. My stepmother was here. And they all 4 go to different churches, or all 3 of them. There's 4 groups that go. James goes to a different congregation as well. But as they sat together, people interrupted them. People wanted to know him, get to know him, and that made me feel so good. The last thing my sister said when she left, she said, I met a lot of people today that I wanted to hug every one of their necks. James said the same thing. I was proud of that, and I thank you for that. But folks, we really don't have nearly enough time to discuss all the good reasons that we need to be involved in these shine groups, but let me say this. The blessings will be infinite. And I believe that we can grow a better church with all of us being a part of those things. Our shepherd lunches and our shine groups. The Bible says that there was a time when Jesus' family was embarrassed by him. Remember that story in Mark chapter 3? Jesus had been teaching and driving out demons. He had become a very popular teacher, and his family said, hey, wait a minute. This is crazy. We've got to go get him. This would have been the equivalent of an intervention. And the family planned to say, Jesus, you can't do this anymore. Let me read this to you. Mark 3, verse 20 and 21, and then we'll skip down to 31, and we'll read all the way through 35. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. They were embarrassed. They were saying he has an evil spirit. They were really embarrassed. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived, and standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. And he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my sister and my mother." Folks, Jesus is telling us tonight that if we want this family to be what it needs to be, then it needs to be our family. We need to be a part of this family. And if we need to do that, that's what we need to do. Solomon said, "The attaining of wisdom and discipline for understanding of words and insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. For the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline." The Proverbs of Solomon for attaining wisdom and discipline. I don't know where you are spiritually tonight, but I do know one thing. We can be better people than we are. I know I can be. And all of us understand that. We all have that understanding. It's not something that's new to us. We've heard it all of our lives. But my question is, what can you do in your life tonight and from this point forward to do better than what we've done in the past? I hope that you'll take this and look at it and think about it and be a part of something that you can get invested in a way that maybe you've never been invested in it before, to learn about God a little bit better, to be able to sit down with somebody and share the hardships that you're going through, to pray with someone, to build a relationship. I hope that you'll do that. But tonight, if there's anyone here who is in need of anything spiritually that we can help you with, maybe a problem in your life, maybe that sin that Satan's ticking on you every day or more often than others. Maybe there's just some need for prayer, for strength. Whatever your need is. We're going to sing the song of encouragement to encourage you to come and ask for prayer. And maybe it's just that you stay where you are and you ask for God's guidance by yourself. That's fine. But if we can help you in any way, won't you